The main study that I'm familiar with is Dr. Tashkin's study. Tashkin is
Yes,
a
yes.
pulmonologist at UCLA, and he found basically that the more cannabis that you smoke, the less likely you are to get lung cancer. Interestingly enough, a similar study that had far fewer participants was done in New Zealand, and it had exactly the same outcome, except the last little box of those who were heavy users of cannabis had too few people in it in order to be statistically significant. And so those results should have been thrown out. When those results are included, then with that box, which didn't mean anything, it showed that there was an increase. The United States government chose to ignore the results of Tashkin's 2,100 patient study and instead emphasized the statistically not significant finding in the New Zealand study, which, except for the box that wasn't significant, had exactly the same findings with Tashkin, except not as powerful since it only had 300 participants instead of 2,100 participants. I mean, this is part of the mendacity of the government in trying to marginalize these kinds of findings, and it has been difficult to get the United States government to be involved in funding or providing cannabis to do these kinds of studies. Now, some of these studies are finally being done in that they're being privately funded, although it's not easy to get the funding. My understanding was that Dr. Sean McAllister, who had done research with breast cancer in mice, was now had the approval, and I don't know whether it was the approval of the state of California or the approval of the federal government, to do research with breast cancer, and he's still looking for funding. I mean, you would think that the federal government would provide funding for it. Now, one of the nice things in California in regards to research and funding for research, we recently passed Proposition 64, which legalizes the recreational use of cannabis, and one of the little goodies in there is that $2 million of the taxes that are collected will go for research, whether it's cancer research or not. It really depends on the creativity and the energy and interest of the research community. But I would be very surprised if there weren't a lot of researchers who had an interest in the use of cannabis to treat cancer that wouldn't try to go after that $2 million. Well, the Sacramento Bee contacted myself and several other physicians and asked a slightly different but related question: is how do you think this will affect your business as a physician that recommends medical cannabis? And I was surprised that all of us agreed. I mean, none of us had talked to each other about it. We all said we thought it would increase our business. And the reporter was somewhat surprised. I said, look, I think it'll decrease the business of those doctors who are catering to the young who really just want to protect themselves from being arrested. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but they don't really have any significant medical issues. And I said, I think that this is going to make it more acceptable to people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, that it will decrease the stigma enough that they will reach out to reputable physicians to try to get recommendations. Now, in terms of how this will affect the rest of the United States, that's hard to say because, California has a reputation for being a place full of fruits and nuts, right? There's a joke about the tilt theory in the U.S. that if you tilt up the U.S. towards the West Coast, all the loose nuts and flakes gravitate there. And so when you have changes in Washington, Oregon, and California, there's a certain amount of skepticism in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Georgia. and I think you'll continue to see that kind of skepticism until we have some celebrity. You know, the U.S. is enamored with celebrities. Look at the President of the United States, who knows not one thing about how to be a politician. And so one of these days, a specialist or a celebrity is going to come out. I mean, we have a few celebrities. It's not that nobody has come out, but we're going to have more and more. And when the right celebrity comes out, somebody who is seen as salt of the earth or is seen as conservative or so forth, I think that is probably going to have a bigger impact than the fact that we legalize the recreational use of cannabis, because I think many places in the rest of the United States, they figure, well, they're just a bunch of crazies, or they're just a bunch of Hillary Clinton supporters, and we're not going to pay any attention to what the people in California think is the right way to go. Thank you. I think that we're running, the United States is running way behind Spain and Israel and Italy, where I think they're doing a lot more aggressive research with less interference from the government. I think there still is a certain hesitancy out there to fully accept and integrate the use of medicinal cannabis into mainstream medicine. But the longer we go along, the more that's happening. And I do think that people like Manuel Guzman and, of course, Raphael Mechoulam and his whole lab, and also the researchers in Italy have a lot more support. And I think that we're going to see the cancer agenda pushed more by European researchers than by American researchers, because there are far fewer hoops for them to jump through. Now, that said, and having made my snarky remark about Trump, I heard a presentation at a conference in Long Beach, California, called The State of Marijuana, and one of the speakers was one of the more conservative members of the House delegation from California, a man named Dana Rohrabacher, who also is very supportive of marijuana. He's an old surfer, and he said that he thought that Mr. Trump would legalize marijuana because, and he said that Trump had used topical application of tincture of cannabis to deal with arthritis in his shoulders. Trump is extraordinarily unpredictable. He's all over the map. But if Trump were to come out and say, hey, I use cannabis, it helped me, and I am going to reschedule to Schedule 2, you got a whole new ballgame.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And sorry to hold up your food.